Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me for this short little video. My name is Robin Aiello and I'm a marine biologist. I've spent my entire life near, on, or under the sea, literally. I was only about a week old when my mom brought me back from the hospital, and straight away she took me into the Atlantic Ocean for my very first swim. Thank goodness I was a summer baby born in June. Can you imagine if I was born in the middle of January? It would have been a very cold swim. Now, I never meant to be a marine biologist. I always thought I was going to become an eye surgeon. I was going to follow in the steps of my grandfather, my father, and my brother. Until I failed my first physics quiz at Harvard University. And that's when I decided to drop pre-med and look for something else. Purely by accident, I ended up in a lecture hall listening to Professor Stephen Jay Gould, a very famous evolutionist. And that is when I fell madly in love with a field of study called adaptation. This is looking at what features animals or plants or any living thing have that allow them to survive in some of the harshest, most extreme environments in the world. Why are some animals brightly colored and others dull? Why do some fish have spots and others have stripes? I started my official marine biology career in 1984, straight out of university. And then I started slowly to become a scientific expedition leader, leading scuba diving trips around the world. And we did some amazing research. I lived underwater for 2 weeks. I dove under the ice in Antarctica. It was just fantastic. I ended up in Australia running my own environmental management business. But in 2003, I decided to make a change in my career. I started working on expedition cruise ships, fell madly in love with it, and in 2008 I joined Silversea Cruises for their inaugural Antarctic cruise, and I've never left. I've been here for a very, very long time, and I've seen nearly every single part of the world. So people ask me, what's my favorite part of the world? Well, it's really hard to say, but I have to admit the polar regions have really grabbed my heart. Even though I still spend 2 to 3 months every year up here, I never ever get tired of it. It's like going on a safari. If you keep your eyes open, you never know what you might spot. Now, for those of you who have met me and listened to some of my lectures, you know I can get quite excited and very passionate. Every animal I see is instantly my favorite animal for that moment in time. But today I'd like to introduce you to really what is one of my all-time favorite creatures, found only in the Arctic. The amazing, magnificent walrus. Now, I always get asked, if one walrus is called a walrus, what do you call more than one walrus? Is it walrus or walruses? Technically, it's walruses, but you can also just say walrus for both the singular and the plural. Now, I still remember my very first walrus sighting. We were out on deck, and one of the team shouted out, "Walrus, over there!" And I rushed over to the railing, grabbed my binoculars, and had a look around. And this is what I saw. A couple of dark brown lumps on the ice. They really looked to me more like a couple of old rusty oil drums than these magnificent walrus I was expecting to see. But as we got closer with the ship, they slowly started to take on a shape, until finally one of them raised their heads, and it's like, wow, there they were. These huge, magnificent animals right there in front of me. I think I actually started to have a little bit of a tear in my eye. They were just so amazing. Seriously, there's nothing else in the world that looks like a walrus. They're really big. I mean, really, really big. And really, really fat. They can grow up to 4 meters or 13 feet and weigh over 1.5 tons. That's about the size of a full-grown hippo. And if you've never seen a hippo, you can imagine it as the size of a compact car like a Mini Cooper. And of course, you can't miss those magnificent tusks. They can be up to 80 centimeters long or 2.5 feet. And they are made out of ivory, exactly like the elephant ivory, but even harder and denser. Now, I'm going to tell you a really cool story here. In the mid to late 1700s, walrus tusks were used by dentists in the United States to make dentures and false teeth. And during the American Revolution, the supply chain of walrus tusks from Canada was interrupted by the war. So one Boston dentist, Dr. Daniel Scott, was so desperate for walrus tusks that he wrote a letter to Harvard University. He wanted to borrow the walrus skull, complete with its tusks, that was on display at the Harvard Museum of Comparative Zoology. And he promised to replace that skull after the war. So Harvard ended up giving him those tusks, and he did indeed replace the skull after the war, and that's the one that's on display in the museum now. But dentures made from walrus tusks apparently had one little issue. Dentures from seahorse ivory caused bad breath and made food taste disagreeable. It used to be thought that walruses used their tusks for digging in the mud when they were foraging underwater. But now that we have all these fancy underwater video cameras and ROVs, scientists have been able to show that in fact the walrus do not use the tusks for digging. Rather, they use them as weapons. And on land, of course, walrus will use them to fend off polar bears. Although the bears won't usually go for a full-grown walrus, they will go into a herd and try to attack the baby walruses. And the mothers are fierce in their protection of their babies. But mainly, the male walruses use their tusks to fight one another. Now, this is during the mating season where they have these amazing, incredible battles to show their strength and to gain their dominance. The males will rise up, and they slam into one another, jabbing their tusks into the necks of their opponents. This is to show their strength, and apparently, like in most animal groups, the female walrus will only mate with the strongest males, the dominant ones. A really cool adaptation that the males have to prevent fatal injuries is really thick skin around the necks and chests. The skin here is twice as thick as the skin that covers the rest of the body. It can be up to 10 centimeters or 4 inches thick. These warty bumps, they're called nodules. And it's a very good feature that you can use to, in the field, tell the males apart from the females, because females have smooth necks. You can see on the one on the right here, there's none of that lumpy, warty look. But the male on the left has that very distinctive extra skin around its chest and neck area. But one of the best ways to tell if you're looking at a female or a male, if you see a baby. The babies are called calves, and they are just so cute. I mean, look at this guy. He's just adorable. He's got that short little muzzle. He's got the rolls of baby fat, no tusks. Now, when they're born, they're somewhere around 3 to 4 feet long, so that's a meter or just a little bit more. It can weigh up to about 100 or so pounds, so just a little bit smaller than I am. And they never leave their mother's side. They're always touching one another, whether they're on land or in the water. Now, during the summer, walrus will gather in large groups up on the beaches, and these are called haul-outs. It's kind of like a big slumber party. They just lying around, grunting, snoring, burping, and scratching. They scratch a lot, constantly moving. And of course, this is because when they molt, they get itchy. They also, when they're hauled out, they huddle together. And this is for warmth, because even though they've got all that blubber to keep them warm, as they lose their hair during the molting process, they can get cold. So they like to be very close to one another in a big pig pile. But my absolute favorite sightings is when they are in the water. These huge animals are so clumsy on land, but they turn into these agile mermaids in the water. They can be very curious, coming right up to the zodiacs, bobbing up and down, trying to get a better look. Because walrus have very small eyes compared to their body size, and very poor eyesight. So you can only imagine what we look like to them. Here's a whole bunch of bright red jackets sitting in a black boat, bobbing up and down on the water. But you can see here and hear them as they look at us, curious. So I really hope you've enjoyed this brief little introduction to walrus. I cannot wait to get back out at sea with all of you. I welcome you on board. Please come join us and let's go find some walrus together. Thank you very much.